Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures. And today we're doing part 41 of our Jurassic World Evolution 2 mod spotlights, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and compare them to their real life fossil counterparts. And today we've got the return of OG Bear with those really awesome paleo edits. He's released a new pack with some cool new animals we'll get into. Plus there's a couple new ones. Hybrid She released a mod and a couple other mods that I'm sure we'll all be very excited to take a look at. So we're going to be starting off today with some of our paleo remodels by OG Bear. We're starting off today with a kind of one that doesn't really often get a paleo edit, or one of the animals that gets forgotten. That's what I really like about OGB. He does a lot of the unforeseen or the underrated ones, you could say. But we got Polacanthus here by OG Bear. And I do have to say, this one is a little bit of a cutie. I do love him. So let's have a look at you. So look how wonderful this guy looks. I'm such a big fan. There's such a great edit. OGB always does a really wonderful edit. So we'll have a look at this guy here. So let's get out of our hide UI. So here is a wonderful guy here. We can see some changes to the skull. They got this very rounded, or almost like a curved skull going on here. Definitely large amount of keratin, similar to most other Noasaurids. These guys are related to some North American ones like Gastonia. And so that helps with our reconstructions of them. So you can see that big beak there, and a round head. And then you can see that square head going on there with the little horns there. Looks very, very cute. Very, very endearing. And then we can see some wonderful changes to the osteoderms there that really give it that Ankylosaur or Noasaur look. It really fits with what we know of Polacanthus. It's got these big row down the side here of osteoderms. And then you've got another row each side. So you've got a middle row and then a side row of really big spikes, which have been potentially used to protect themselves against predators, or potentially even have some thermoregulatory purposes similar to modern crocodile osteoderms, or even potentially fencing with them, which would be quite an interesting sight. But really, really awesome. We can see there's a few kind of lines of skin there. You can see there like that with the osteoderms in there, and then you have this kind of big shield around the hips there, which is characteristic of Gastonia and its relatives, which is quite awesome. We're going to go back down to the feet for a minute, and we can see we've got the proper feet going on here. I don't think this is because you just can't change the texture, but you can see the three-fingered nail, and you can see this one going on here, similar to most other Archosaurs. Really, really awesome. Quite skinny legs for Noasaurs. Noasaurids were kind of a little bit earlier in the family tree of Ankylosaurs. That didn't quite get as big and bulky as the later Ankylosaurs and things like that, like Dinosaurus and Ankylosaurus. These guys are a little bit earlier in the tree, more closely related to things like Gastonia from the early Cretaceous, things like that. And these guys, I believe, are the early Cretaceous as well, found in the Weldon Formation, or the Isle of Wight. So kind of found with animals like baryonyx, things like that. But still really cool regardless. And then we can have a look at the feet here. Looks still really, really nice. And then you can see all the osteoderms going down that tail. So it's got kind of almost like a little retro look, very Walking with Dinosaurs, but the anatomy's definitely been updated. And I think OGB has kind of gone and changed some of the skins a bit. As you can kind of see here, it looks really, really nice. I like this model pattern going on. Really, really cool. So OGB really knocks out of the park with the first one today. So we're going to let them walk off and do their thing. So we can have a look at the next animal. Definitely taking the sweet time at least. But really, really cute. Definitely love these guys. So next up, we got another one done by OG Bear. We've got his Pachyrhinosaurus. So we've got this guy here. Let's have a look at you. Big man. So we can see there's been quite a few changes to this guy. Okay, we'll have a look at you. You can see to the head, the big boss that a lot of Pachyrhinosaurs have, that big boss. All three species, really. You can see there's been a bit of changes there. Really like this big round bulb going on. I think that really shows that keratin. A lot of people like to reconstruct a little bit more ragged and things like that, but the smoother interpretation is still quite possible with all that keratin on there as well. Really, really awesome. And you can see a couple like almost little bumps going on there as well. Looks really, really nice. The species, of course, here is Lansqueri, which is the one with the kind of horns in the middle of the snout, so right there. But you can also see some changes to the face. Got big jugles there. Really, really tall face you can see there with like a big, big beak, especially, and big nostrils. Very similar to a lot of other ceratopsians. Really, really cool. And then you can see that wonderful frill being changed up there with those curving ossicles there. It looks really, really nice. Really does fit the species we're talking about here. Then we can see some changes to the head there, on the side there, big neck and things like that. We can see some changes to the feet as well. They've got the 3 toes instead of the 5 that we keep seeing. Though it probably hidden the nails. They should have like a fleshy horseshoe thing going on, which is you can kind of see going on there. Looks all right. Looks quite nice. And then we can have a look at the body here. Much rounded body. Ceratopsians are kind of known for being quite round and voluptuous, you could say, especially around that body area, big and round, with these large forelimbs, which will almost kind of squat down, which would probably help them have a better center of mass for hitting or charging things. And you can see the big round body with the larger ischium and pubis kind of come around here to create space in the guts for lots and lots of intestines and stuff, so they can digest their food. Big legs and big feet around here. As you can see that 4 nails on the back leg as well. And then you can see that tail is also, I think the tail's still a little bit too long, but we can see it's generally been shrunk down quite a bit. But yeah, looks really, really nice. Definitely a big fan of this edit. Probably one of the lesser edits in terms of changes there, but still really, really cool. The tail does still look nice though. I am a big fan of that. Really, really cool. So really awesome Pachyrhinosaurus. And it still fits the Jurassic Park style, which is so cool. Really, really love it. So we're going to let them walk off and do their thing. Another knock out of the park by OG Bear. Let them run off and do their thing. So next up, this one is another one by OG Bear, but it's not Dilophosaurus. It's something really cool that I think you guys will like. So we have got here, this is Dilophosaurus, and it's the more accurate one that we keep seeing. I love seeing more people do more accurate Dilophosaurus, but really, really cool here. You can see this purple one with the green. That actually looks rather nice. So this is based off the 2022 redescription of Dilophosaurus. So it's really changed a lot of what we thought of it. We knew it was quite big back in the day, much bigger than it was in Jurassic Park, so about 7 meters or so. But this really changed up a lot of what we knew about it and made it a lot more robust and changed the crest and everything. And of course, it didn't have any venom from what we know, and there's no evidence on the hyoid of a big crest like Frill Dragon from Australia. But yeah, really, really cool regardless. We'll start off with the head. We can see some of the changes here. I really love this crest. It really came out beautifully. Love it's big and round. And it's actually been compared a lot to the cask of a cassowary. So it's believed to be a lot of keratin on it and potentially quite hollow and maybe help to regulate their body temperature or potentially make some sounds, things like that. Really, really cool and got a really interesting look to it as well. You can see this guy's got quite good lips as well, and you can see that kind of notch in the jaw as well. These guys still did have that notch in the jaw, which would most likely be help with catching smaller prey or potentially even slippery prey. May have done a little bit of fish eating or just eating smaller slippery things. So really, really awesome. I really like the texture and everything. I think that came out rather nice, especially from the cryo. And then you can see that quite long neck there. And quite big arms with the 4 fingers. I believe these guys kind of had those 4 fingers because they were quite early in the evolutionary tree. And then you can see the body is also still quite long and almost like long oval, and that long tail. We have a look at the back feet here. Very similar to most other theropods, very bird-like in that respect, with big thighs with lots of muscles and to support their body weight. That's why they kind of have a long tail, long head to help counterbalance. But yeah, really, really awesome. Definitely a big fan of this cryo. Another hit from OG Bear, and all the skins actually fit rather well. So definitely a big fan. I'm a big fan of this dark green and orange one here. I think that looks really nice. So this one, unlike Furlongs from the last episode, that one was a cosmetic, and I believe it was still based on the Cryolophosaurus in terms of animation stuff, but that actually replaces. That is a cosmetic for the Dilophosaurus, so you can choose between the regular one and the 2022 Dilophosaurus. But for these guys, this is a replacement of the Cryolophosaurus only, and I believe it may try to get worked in as a replacer or a cosmetic for the Dilophosaurus, but at the moment it's just a replacement for Cryolophosaurus, so just letting you know if you want to download it. If you want something that directly replaces the the Dilophosaurus, or as a cosmetic, you go with Furlongs, but if you still want something that looks more distinct and you just love OGB's model so much, this one replaces the Cryolophosaurus. So just to let you know, and I do love it a lot. I do love OGB's stuff. OGB really does a wonderful job. But yeah, really, really cool. So let them run off and do their thing. Cryolophosaurus actually saved, I think, for edits. It really did save everyone. You can have a look at them interact. It's quite a cute little animation. But for people that want to make accurate Dilophosaurus, since the normal one doesn't really fit, I think having these Cryolophosaurus actually is kind of a savior, which is quite awesome. But next up, we're going to take a little break from OG Bear in terms of remakes. We've got one from Pickle, who has remade his Acrocanthosaurus. So look at this really cool guy here. So this is our Acro, another big carnivore coming in. So we can have a look at that wonderful face here. So we're going to start off with the head, as per usual. We can see some changes there. Acrocanthosaurus is kind of a very charismatic head. It's kind of long with this crest there, and almost like a little dip there. It looks really, really nice. A little bit of a crest there, quite long. And then you can see these guys are related, kind of earlier relative of this Acrocanthosaurus, and I believe they're a North American one. They kind of were in the early Cretaceous, right before most of the kind of early Cretaceous, before things like Tyrannosaurus took over. So that's when Allosaurids or Acrocanthosaurus still kind of lived in North America, and they're kind of famous for that. But Acrocanthosaurus is just so cool. It's got that really charismatic look to it. You can see those changes there. It really does fit the fossil. We have some pretty complete, I believe, skeletals and stuff like that, so it really looks really nice. And then you can see that head there. Acrocanthosaurus is quite famous for being the high-spined lizard. So you can see that there's high neck there is from the really high neural spines at the back of the spine there, so that really gives it an interesting look. And one of the changes he made from his original one is it's slightly more defined, as you can kind of see here. So it isn't quite as fatty as it was before, but I still think it looks quite nice. So you can kind of see that there. Looks really, really cool. The other one was kind of fatty, things like that, but you can kind of see it's a little bit better defined there. Really fits the animal. I think it looks quite nice. And then we can see, obviously, the big folds of skin there, good for stretching to obviously take some food in, of course. Really nice wrinkles detail on the model originally there. But we can also see those tiny little hands, obviously the correct as well. A lot of the dinosaurs did get proper hand pronation in the once Jurassic World Evolution 2 came out, so this is the one that got it as well. It looks really, really nice. You can see that big round body there, especially with the big neural spines. They've got the big three-clawed hands, probably used for grasping prey. There's been some research into that, and grasping prey, things like that. And then you see that big round body there. Also that long tail, where they also carry that neural spine. So you can see it kind of goes up like that, and then goes down into the tail. And you can kind of see it also extends there. Also, you can see the ischium and the pubis down there, coming up to make that kind of boot there. And one thing about these guys is that Acrocanthosaurus actually still had a pretty powerful bite. A lot of we talk about Tyrannosaurs and a lot, and then we talk about how powerful their jaws were, but often large theropods such as Acrocanthosaurus, Giganotosaurus, these guys still had quite powerful bite forces, so potentially around the range of like about 2 tons or so. So comparable to like smaller tyrannosaurs such as Albertosaurus, which is like half the size, but I think it really shows that these guys still had quite powerful bites, and even though their skulls weren't quite as heavily duty built like Tyrannosaurs were, they still could pack a pretty nasty wallop. But yeah, I really love this edit. Pickle always does a wonderful job. It really helps, and you can see the changes of the feet as well, probably made it a little bit bigger. Looks really, really awesome. I'm definitely a big fan of this Acro. Really, really love this guy. I'm definitely a big fan. So let him run off and do his thing. So we're going to be moving on to the water for a little bit. We've got another really cool OG Bear remodel. So we've got this one is quite unique because it really changes everything up. We have got Liopleurodon. We're not going to cover the red one. The red one looks a little bit over the top, but we'll find a nice coloured one to take a look at. Let's have a look at you. You're real pretty. We'll have a look at you. So this is our Liopleurodon. You can see the model has basically just been taken out and it's been replaced with the Purussaurus model, but it's been edited a lot. We can see here, we're going to start off with the head, of course. None of this crocodile osteoderm going on, but we're going to start off with the head. We can see some changes to the head there. Liopleurodon has a very charismatic skull. You can kind of see that there, a characteristic skull. Quite round there, and they've got these large teeth at the front here. Particularly around the front, that would have been really great for catching prey such as large fish and marine animals and things like that. Squids, ammonites. So, like most other kind of aquatic animals that hunt larger prey, they have these large interlocking teeth that helps them catch that more slippery prey. And then kind of down the jaws, they have that smaller, typically smaller teeth. Yeah, really, really nice. You can see that eye there looks really, really nice. And see that big bulk there with probably big jaw muscles to help bite through some potentially pretty hard shells and things like that, especially in ammonites and sea turtles and things like that. But yeah, we can see on their back here, no osteoderms whatsoever, so fits much, much better with what we know of plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, which this guy's definitely a pliosaur. Also made a little bit chunkier because we do have some pretty good skin impressions from a lot of plesiosaurs and pliosaurs, and it shows that they did have quite a lot of flesh to them, so quite a bit bulkier than we often interpret them as. You see that big bulky neck as well. We start off with the flippers. You can kind of see that back flipper is about 30% longer, I believe, than the front flipper. Often it's kind of reconstructed the other way around. You can see quite a big flipper going on in the back there, and you can see the front one as well. Very much swimming like penguins is a great example. And we can also see here, really, really awesome, we can see this tail fluke going on. And what's really, really cool is that most people typically go with the horizontal interpretation, so going up, very much like an ichthyosaur or a shark. But this is another equally valid interpretation of something very like flat. Vertical. This is horizontal. So this is very much like what you see in whales and manatees and things like that. But there's a little bit of research into that, and there's a blog post by Mark Whitten who talks about it. It's kind of either or, really. There is some evidence that shows like some species may have had vertical flukes, other species may have had horizontal, and it's very interesting based on like what we know. It's technically, for the most part, either interpretation is correct. So it's really nice to see someone trying something a little different and getting this interpretation going on with the more horizontal fluke going on. Really, really nice. And I think it really adds something really distinct to Liopleurodon. And it's just so nice to get an actual really nice looking Liopleurodon. The only thing I'd probably change, I think it'd be really cool to change the skin so we can get like a dark black skin and really give us something like that. But OG Bear really knows how to create some good skins, so I reckon he could do that pretty easily. Just give us something that's like grey or black, just like the original Chronosaurus, pretty much. I think that'd be the best thing to do. But otherwise, really, really awesome. OG Bear also did that as well for his edit for the he redid some other edits that I'm not going to show too many times. We did a Lasmosaurus, and that has a new tail as well and kind of fits that horizontal. So either interpretations are quite likely, though I personally would lean more to the vertical. But this is still a very likely interpretation, and it still came out rather nice. Really, really big fan. Really, really cool. So we're going to let them swim off and do their thing. And next up, we've got some new species. So I know everyone loves their new species. We are going to have a look at one by Hyper SGYT. We have got Purussaurus. Purussaurus. Oh, Purussaurus. Look at this wonderful guy here. We'll have a wait for him to pause in a good position and get a good look at him. So look at this wonderful guy. So this is Purussaurus. I keep saying Purussaurus, but it's Purussaurus. Yeah, really, really awesome. Just look at how beautiful he is. So this is Purussaurus. These guys are an extinct giant caiman, or an extinct genus of giant caiman, that lived in South America during the Miocene. So this is not a big late Cretaceous kind of like Deinocheirus or Sarcosuchus. These guys are much more recent in our history. These guys are from the Miocene, so about 20 million years ago or so. And these guys have been found in Brazil, Peruvian Amazon, also found in Colombia, and the northern Venezuela as well, and the Panama, so they had quite a wide range. And we know a little bit about this guy, really, really cool. The largest known species is Purussaurus brasiliensis. The skull itself is about 1,453 millimeters, or about 57 inches. And it's been estimated that these guys, the largest estimates put these guys at about 12 to 13 meters long, or about 41 feet. Even like 15 meters is a big estimate. But there have been also estimates ranging from 5.6 to 12 tons. So making it pretty much one of the largest, if not the largest, crocodilian ever to exist. But most recently, the 2022 study estimated kind of a length of about 7 to 9 meters, or about 25 to 30 feet, and a mass of about 2 to 6 tons. Though there have been other estimations of kind of like 10 meters. So the largest estimate recently from this 2022 study is about 10 meters long, or about 33 feet, and about 3 to 5 tons, which is still quite big. And it doesn't rule out these larger estimates, but 10 to 13 meters is probably a good range for this guy, and has really come out rather interestingly. Really, really cool. And they've also been estimated these guys would need a daily intake of about 40 kilograms, or 90 pounds a day, which is really, really awesome. But one thing as well is we know crocodiles are quite famous for their bite force, and they could see Purussaurus as a caiman, so they are related to modern caimans. They're a type of alligatoroid, or alligators. They're related to modern caimans like black caimans, Cuvier stalk caimans, things like that. And you can see they've got this quite big round skull here that would have been very well adapted for crushing, especially like alligators. They're really well adapted for crushing. And their bite force has been estimated at up to about 52,500 newtons, or about 5.3 metric tons of force. And the high estimate is about 69,000 newtons, or about 7 tons of metric force. So basically, it'd be like crushing you with an elephant. So that shows you how strong these guys' jaws were. And what were these guys eating? Especially in the Miocene, a very interesting habitat these guys lived in. So these guys would have been living in a very interesting ecosystem. As an adult, it would have preyed on very large invertebrates. So things like xenarthrans, so giant sloths, and things like that, or nodoungulates, so some of the things like toxodonts, early relatives of things like that. They would have been feeding on those big guys. And there would have been no really big competition from these guys. And researchers actually proposed that this large size may have actually led them to be a little bit more vulnerable than other species, since the constantly changing environment that it lived in actually changed a lot, and they couldn't really adapt fast enough, and they were over-specialized for these other for this habitat and feeding on large animals. And when those large animals go, obviously the crocodiles go. And that led the way for kind of more modern caimans, so like the black caiman, Cuvier's dwarf caiman, spectacle caiman, to kind of eke out a living and do some stuff there. But so there are a couple species. There's Brasiliensis, which is the type species. There's also Niverensis and Muradi, which is Muradi's actually has some adaptations better adapted for support to better support the limbs. So these guys may have been a little bit more active on land, for example. And between the three species, there's a bit of variation, but typically they always are about 2 inches or about 50 millimeters long, and they curve backwards. And it seems these guys had ridges that were used for puncturing flesh, things like that, and they're actually rather conical. So they're big, thick, conical teeth that had been used for biting into prey and ripping through flesh, very similar to that of Tyrannosaurus. And Purussaurus, as I mentioned, is one of the largest known crocodiliforms to exist. There's other ones such as Sarcosuchus, Deinocheirus, and Rhamphasuchus, which all got to similar sizes. But Sarcosuchus and Deinocheirus, while being quite similar in proportion, these guys are from the early and late Cretaceous, respectively. So Sarcosuchus is from the early Cretaceous and not closely related to crocodiles. And Deinocheirus is a relative of alligators, an alligatorid, and is from the late Cretaceous. But one study also indicates that Purussaurus may have been heavier, and being much thicker, potentially could be quite a bit heavier, as I mentioned, get up to about like 12 tons is the maximal estimate. But I would probably say 6 to 7 tons would probably be more realistic. And Rhamphasuchus lived about the same time as Purussaurus, so there's two large crocodilians living in the habitats of these guys in the early the Miocene of the Amazon. But Rhamphasuchus was actually a lot more gharial-like. So these guys would have been splitting in their niche. These guys would have been large predators attacking large things, while Rhamphasuchus would have been very much like a gharial and feeding on big fish, things like that. So that helps with niche partitioning. And also, according to a biomechanical model of the skull of Purussaurus, it shows that they were able to do death rolls. So that's when modern crocodilians, they'll grab something and do a death roll and roll to try and rip it apart, and they could actually do that too. And all sensory organs, you can see that on the head, you can see these guys have got the eyes at the tip of the head and so is the nose. These guys will likely be very much like modern caimans, hiding in the water and being ambush predators. So really, really awesome. So what lived with these guys? So there was a lot of really interesting animals that lived in the Miocene with these guys. There were large reptiles such as Stupendemus, which is the largest freshwater turtle. So that got about like 2 or 3 meters long. So that would have been a big meal for these guys. And other crocodilians such as Charistasuchus and Morasuchus, things like that. Many different types of birds, including sloths, rodents, and relatives of the modern capybara, which got up to about 700 kilograms or about 1,500 pounds. There are lots of primates. There were also river dolphins at the time, and they would have all probably been prey for animals such as Purussaurus. And in this habitat, they would have been living in rivers, floodplains, and lakes, with many types of freshwater fish and marine fish, and also turtles and crocodilians and terrestrial and aquatic mammals, including, as I mentioned, river dolphins, were present with the Venezuelan species, and Brasiliensis kind of lived around that time as well, I believe. And the earlier species kind of lived around with some really interesting animals. Niverensis lived with Astrapatheus, such as Gastropitherium and Xenothopitherium. Those are a really weird group of nodoungulates, really, really cool animals. And the early species of Marascasuchus and Gyptosuchus as well, and a terrestrial crocodilian named as Langstona, or crocodiliform technically. So this fauna typically is about the late Miocene, or about 30 million years ago. So these guys would have been living around that time. So potentially up to about 10 million years ago, I would say. But really, really interesting. It shows that there's still some pretty big crocodilians up to about even recently. And really, really big. Definitely a big fan of these guys. And I think JWE2 really did a wonderful job with giving us a really big, wonderful crocodilian. So we'll let them swim off and do his thing. As we said. He's not even like... Oh, this camera's really annoying. Anyway, let's let him swim off and do his thing. Really, really awesome. Look at him. How beautiful is he? Really, really awesome. So next up, we've got another really wonderful animal from who's it? Hulk 1215 or Hawk, I believe you say that. But really, really cool. We have got Austroraptor. So this is Austroraptor, which means Austroraptor. So that's kind of the southern thief. These guys are a genus of large dromaeosaurs. You can kind of see here, quite obviously. Really, really cool. And these guys would have lived in the late Cretaceous of Argentina. So these guys were actually quite large, but quite lean. They were a bipedal carnivore. They got about 5 to 6 meters, or about 16 to 20 feet. And actually is one of the largest dromaeosaurs known, with only things such as Dakotaraptor, Echilobeta, and Utahraptor bigger than itself. So that's quite interesting. So the type specimen was found in the Allen Formation in Argentina, and it was discovered in 2002 and is based off like a fragmentary remains, some jaws and some legs parts, so like the humerus and some ribs and torso, things like that, associated bones. And it was named in 2008 as Austroraptor cambanzi and was described by Fernando Emilio Novas, Diego Pol, Juan Cale, and Juan Pafaro, and Jorge Calavo, I believe you say that. And its name means southern thief, which comes from the Latin word Austria, which means the southern wind, and the Latin name for raptor, which means thief. So really, really cool. And there was a second specimen actually found in 2012. It refers to a second specimen. And it's a little bit better known. It's an adult, the individual is slightly smaller than the holotype, and it has several elements of the lower arms, hand, and foot, which is quite cool. So these guys are actually the largest dromaeosaur known from the southern hemisphere, and is estimated about 5 meters, or about 16 feet long, or even about 6 meters, and about 300 kilograms. And Thomas Holt suggested it's actually quite comparable to a lion, so about 91 to 227 kilograms, or about 200 to 500 pounds. So you can see much more slender skull than a lot of other dromaeosaurs, and they had non-serrated teeth that actually might have been quite similar to those of spinosaurs that kind of show that kind of habitat, potentially what it was eating. And Austroraptor is quite unique in that regard, and it has some really weird morphology, which has led to people suggest that it's a paleontological chimera, so there's maybe other animals preserved in it. But it's really kind of, we don't really know that. But actually, these guys have very similar features in, like, their skulls very similar to smaller troodontids. Their front limbs are also quite short for a dromaeosaur. And among dromaeosaurs, only some things like a Xianyulong and Melaleuca have reduced forelimbs, and actually suggests that the relative length of the eyes have caused them to be compared to like Tyrannosaurus, so there's no really close relative relation between those two. So in terms of its classification, it's kind of this really own weird group. So there's a group of dromaeosaurs called the Unilagines. So these are a group of dromaeosaurs that are really interesting. That includes animals such as Rahunavis, Unilagia, Buetoraptor, and Nevuqueoraptor, things like that. But really interesting group. And even Dakotaraptor's been included in that group a couple times, which is quite interesting. But they're in their own group, so they're more basal to kind of dromaeosaurs. They're in their own groups. They're kind of adapted with these long snouts, things like that, potentially to a little bit. They're like Spinosaurids, but the raptor version of that, so that's quite cool. In terms of their paleobiology, these guys have been suggested to be better at running pursuit predators than other dromaeosaurs. And while the northern dromaeosaurs from like Laurasia, so North America and Asia and Europe, these guys may have been more stocky. These guys would have been faster, and it's likely these guys preyed on small, fast animals, though what exactly they fed on is unknown. But really, really interesting. And models show that these guys could potentially travel large distances in pursuit of prey, and that's why they may have had quite long legs in terms of Unilagines. They had quite long legs. They also had long forelimbs and things like that, and Bueoraptor may have actually been able to swallow prey whole due to its lack of serrated teeth, which is quite interesting. But the same model has been proposed for the much larger Austroraptor with a few exceptions, because they didn't have larger arms. They may not have been used their arms to catch prey. And the teeth are quite conical and possibly stronger, which may be used for hunting larger prey. And this has kind of led to them being compared to Spinosaurids. So it's very possible that these guys may have been very piscivorous or eating fish a lot like Spinosaurids, because they have a few adaptations like them, like shorter forearms, longer legs, so they would have been quite good for wading in the water. So it could be another thing to their ecology, so that's very, very cool. And in terms of paleoecology, these guys have been found in the competing Maastrichtian of the late Cretaceous, so right at the end of the Cretaceous in Argentina. And they're estimated to live between 78 to 66 million years ago, so right up to the end of the dinosaurs. And they share their environment in the Allen Formation with all sorts of different and cool dinosaurs. These guys have been shown to indicate the increase of understanding of their groups and also things like that. There would have been lots of Carcharodontosaurs living with these guys, and there are a lot of large Coelurosaurs actually quite common after the demise of a lot of Carcharodontosaurs. So things like Megaraptorans, such as like Mappy and things like that, got bigger as the Carcharodontosaurs kind of went extinct. And there's also a few other dinosaurs like large Titanosaurs, also like Aleosaurus, which is a titanosaur there. A range of herbivorous dinosaurs, all sorts of titanosaurs and hadrosaurs, such as like Limpaposaurus and Bonapartosaurus and Calyptosaurus, all sorts of different cool animals, and I believe even some mix of like titanosaurs and hadrosaurs and some abelisaurs. So a very interesting paleo environment, and these guys probably kind of made their own little niche. They also lived with Saltosaurus, funnily enough. But these guys kind of carved out their own little niche by being little fish eaters, potentially. But yeah, I really, really love the feathers, how they came out on this guy. And that blue came out really nice as well. Really, really nice. Gives a nice contrast to the big and bulky Utahraptor. So yeah, really, really awesome. Big, big fan. So I'm going to let them run off and do their thing. And next up, we've got a couple giants that I'm quite excited to talk about. So this is another cosmetic, as I'll get into. This is done by Furlong and Game Videos for Life. This is edit of the Therizinosaurus. So really wonderful here, you can see some changes. So one of the bigger changes here, you can see some of the other feathers from other dinosaurs have been imported on this guy. You can see the wing feathers of Pyroraptor, and then you can see the tail of Oviraptor, and some back ones of Pyroraptor as well. Looks really, really nice, gives a much more feathered look. It's also known as the Royal Therizinosaurus, which is quite interesting. But yeah, you can see how wonderful this guy is. You can see there's obviously been some changes to the anatomy as well as a paleo edit. So you can see the longer neck there and the big bulky skull, even a little bit more rounded skull, which looks quite nice. Long neck and a big round body, and that shorter tail at the back there, and these large claws, very characteristic of Therizinosaurs. Really, really cool, and the big gut and the tall posture. But what's really, really awesome is that it shows that there's kind of different interpretations. The original one, obviously, even the original edit that I covered without the extra feathers, that is still a very likely interpretation, because this guy and animals such as Deinocheirus, is we'll be covering next, Deinocheirus, Tyrannosaurs. There's been talk about a limit to bigger animals, so the bigger an animal gets with feathers, the less beneficial it comes, so like basically the more the heater. It's not a published thing, and it's not a hard and fast rule. But the largest dinosaur that we have that we definitely know had feathers, or some feathers preserved with them, was something like Eutyranus, which I've covered before. They got about 9 meters long and probably weighed a couple tons, so they could be right at that limit. But yeah, I'd really like to see more feathery interpretations. It's very likely these guys would have had pennaceous feathers, so feathers like this, like almost like you'd see on a bird wing. So very likely these guys would have had them. But you can see that different interpretation there. I took this skin because it just looks like the most original one from the movie. But there's all sorts of different skins based on different kind of pop culture appearances of Therizinosaurus as well. But I just love this. I just love seeing very feathery Therizinosaurus. I just think it fits perfectly. But I would also like to see... I'd like to see someone make a naked Therizinosaurus. I think it'd be quite interesting to show and cover. Show this contrast of both... interpretations of these species, because there is the argument because their relatives had feathers, they almost definitely had feathers because of their relatives, but because of their large size compared to their relatives, like Therizinosaurus and Deinocheirus, are most definitely over 3 tons if this limit is true. So it's very likely they could have independently lost feathers or partially lost feathers. So different interpretations could work and really show something interesting. And I'm definitely a big fan of how this guy's come out. Furlong has really done a wonderful job, and I recommend you guys pretty much download all the mods that I cover, because obviously if you like these videos, you like paleo accurate. But I just love like seeing the feathers, and it's so nice to have feathers finally in the game, and then we can have dinosaurs with feathers. I'm really keen to see some more paleo edits with adding feathers to things and things like that. So really, really cool. Definitely love this guy. Just going to let him walk off and do his thing. So next up, last but certainly not least, we have got Deinocheirus again, done by Master Doot. We have got a feathered version. So here is another Deinocheirus. We covered this guy back in part 36, I believe, but that was the featherless version, or featherless variant, which is an equally likely interpretation, as I mentioned. But this is a really nice interpretation of a feathered one. We can see the feathered texture on the body there, and I think the anatomy just looks a little bit nicer, a little bit more nice head, things like that. But these guys actually do get on well in terms of if you have both the featherless and the feathered version. Get on well. It'd be nice to see this guy with actual feathers sometime in the future, but we can see it's kind of done the old way of feathers, fur planes, things like that, instead of a shader, but looks really, really nice regardless. So I'll give a quick once-over if there is Deinocheirus. So Deinocheirus is a large ornithomimosaur, so related to things like Gallimimus and Ornithomimus, things like that. These guys were from the late Cretaceous of the Namek Formation. They actually lived with Therizinosaurus and Tarbosaurus and animals like that, and lived about 70 million years ago, so about that end of the Cretaceous. These guys were first discovered in 1965 and were only known from a pair of large arms and shoulder girdles and a few other bones. And people were like, what the heck? It was named as Deinocheirus McPhurus, I believe you say that. And the genus name means like horrible hand, which is quite cool. And no further remains were pretty much found for the next 50 years. So basically, from that point, we had no idea what it looked like until about 2014, where 2 more complete specimens were described, and it made it look even weirder. It's got this big spoonbill-like face here, got this big wacky hump in the shorter tail. It really just makes it even weirder than we thought it could ever be, and really shows that paleontology really does love to surprise us. So these guys are also very unusual for its clade. Deinocheirus is quite unusual. It got quite big as well. The size estimates have been about 11 meters or something like that, about 36 feet long, and weighed about 6.5 tons, so way past that 3-ton limit. And though it was a bulky animal, it still had hollow bones in some places to save weight, so very similar to a lot of dinosaurs have that. And it had large, blunt, 3-fingered claws, as you can see there, and had this sail along its back, you kind of see there, almost like the covenant fat, things like that. And short legs and these blunt claws. And it also looks like most of the vertebrae had been highly phonematized with air sacs. And there's also at the end of the tail, this is what kind of gives evidence that Deinocheirus may have had feathers. There's a pycnostyle. So if you don't know what a pycnostyle is, most birds have the end of their tail. They have a small, like, vertebrae that's kind of all been lumped together where that supports the tail feathers. And seeing a pycnostyle suggests that these guys would have had large tail fans in life, which is quite interesting. And as I mentioned, their skull is almost very much like a spoonbill, quite big and wide and deep and things like that. As we know from their diet, there's been preserved fish scales and plants in their guts, and that suggests that these guys would very likely be eating omnivorous diets, so eating plants and invertebrates. So pretty much like most kind of waterfowl, really, is probably the best comparison, like things like ducks and stuff, but like on a larger scale, of course. But their classification was not really well known for a while. But we know that they're definitely their own kind of group now of ornithomimids. So there's other animals related to them, kind of like Bichelong, things like that. Looks really interesting. Or Gladulomimus, things like that. And there's actually a lot of convergence with this guy and Therizinosaurus, having big claws and stubby bodies and long necks, things like that. But they did share the same ecosystem, and these guys were much more omnivorous than Therizinosaurus, it seems, which is quite interesting. But lots of research into these guys. There's been looked into their brains. So these guys most likely had small, quite sauropod-like brains, so not quite as smart, or well, I wouldn't say smart, but brains were just not typically as big as other ornithomimosaurs for their size, things like that. And they had these big blunt claws, as I mentioned. They got that specialized diet. They would have been feeding very much in on small fish, marine water plants, things like that, very much like that. And in the environment they lived in, the Gobi Desert at the time, it would have been very much like the Okavango Delta has been like a modern comparison. So lots of water and things like that. Lots of small animals for these guys to feed on. Lots of small fish and not marine, I keep saying marine, but water plants. They would have lived with animals such as Saurolophus, also Therizinosaurus, which may have been a competitor for these guys, Gigantoraptor. Lots of fish, pachycephalosaurs like Prenocephalae, Nemectosaurus, and Ornithocolda, which is a type, both types of sauropods, and Baraspalda and Saurolophus were lived with, and other predatory dinosaurs would have lived with, such as Alioramus, Tarbosaurus as well, and troodontids such as Zanzibar and Turkisaurus, and many other types of ornithomimosaurs like a Gallimimus would have lived with, and Ceramimus, and also oviraptorids such as Roshinia and Elmosaurus, which is quite interesting. So yeah, very interesting ecosystem. But yeah, really, really awesome. It's nice to see that feathered variant. I like seeing kind of one of each. You can have your scaleless variant, because that's still a very likely interpretation, as I mentioned, and then you can have your furry variant, which is, or feathered variant, you could say, which is accurate as well, and probably the more accurate one depending on the picture style. We don't have any preserved feathers from Deinocheirus, but with that picture style, it seems very likely that they at least had a tail fan, and it's up to interpretation. Maybe they didn't have so much in terms of their body contour feathers, so they may have just like kept their display feathers, so they may have just had kind of pennaceous feathers on their arms and tail as for display, so that's quite interesting interpretation. So yeah, it allows for a lot of play because as I mentioned, being quite big and living in a warm habitat such as like Botswana is very hot today, somewhere like that, it would have been very hard for large animals like that to keep cool, especially if the 3-ton rule does stand true. So very, very cool, and like seeing different interpretations. I would love to see a Deinocheirus that had proper feathers, like the fur shader feathers, like the Therizinosaurus over here, but I still love it regardless, and Master Dude, I think, knocked it out of the park with this one. I personally prefer the feathered one. I just like the anatomy better. I like the feathers. I think it looks so much cooler, but I'm definitely a big fan of both, and Master Dude's done a wonderful job, and I would like to see them both as like cosmetics of each other in the future, hopefully, and hopefully we maybe can get it officially in the game with feathers. That would be so cool, but I'm definitely a big fan. So we'll let them walk off, do their thing. We covered some feathery dinosaurs today. It's like a special feather episode. But yeah, I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.